Welcome to Bottom Up, a monthly podcast dedicated to issues and topics of interest to young lawyers in Wisconsin and beyond. I'm your host, Emil Ovbiagele. All right, welcome back. This is a continuation of the last episode, which talks about work-life balance, what's missing from that conversation within the law. And we still have our guests with us, Attorney Emily Stedman and Attorney Ryan Woody, along with my co-host, Kristen Hardy. And with the second part of the episode, we were going to talk about what firms are doing, what associates can be doing, what younger lawyers can be doing, what in-house attorneys can be doing, what companies can be doing to help foster work-life balance for lawyers, you know, for all the messiness that the idea might mean, and for everything that it is and is not. It is something that needs to be addressed, and it's something that we need to contend with, especially in light of the increased burnout that we're dealing with within the profession, you know, mental wellness issues. So it's here to stay. It means different things to different people, but that doesn't mean we don't address it and we don't acknowledge it and do things to, improve the status quo.
Yeah, agreed. So if you didn't listen to the last episode, just to kind of you totally should. And I'm going to tell you why, because we talked about our various practice areas, how many years we've been practicing, what work-life balance means to us. Emil tried to lock us into a definition, but we're kind of building off of that. We talked about integration and flexibility and boundaries and choice, and how it's very individualized depending on who you're talking to. So as we kind of move into this next session, we want to talk about those practical solutions that Emil talked about. So I'm very curious at both of your organizations, and I'm happy to talk about mine as well, but what are the firms doing right now to try to give you a little bit more work-life balance, work-life integration? Ryan, I'll kick it to you first.
So I will say off the bat, I had a client that I was having a conversation with, and he was remarking about how frustrated he was with some of the stresses and the work-life balance at his place. And he said the management thinks that if they have this ice cream cart on Wednesdays and they come around to everyone that we'll all be happy. And I think that's, a firm of my size that has these little offices in different states around the country, but we're not huge.
Sorry, how many people are at your firm, Ryan?
So we're over 50, but we're right around 25, 26 attorneys, and then so it's the rest of the staff. And so I would say that this is a concept that we're scuffling with because the different offices have different ideas of what's best for them. California doesn't agree with Texas, and Louisiana doesn't agree with Boston, and so it's hard. It's not something that we can just put a system or a policy in place that will blanket all the offices. As we kind of talked about in our more philosophical last episode, work-life balance, I think for each of the individuals involved, you got to kind of be a doctor and diagnose what the work-life balance issue is that you're trying to remedy before you just issue a prescription that isn't going to work for everyone. And so some of the things that we are doing is listening. And, we've had a lawyer who worked for 6 months from Taiwan because that worked best for his family situation. And, thank goodness for the way that Zoom is, he could actually have a viable litigation practice without missing a beat, albeit he had to be up in the middle of the night. And that worked for him, and it didn't not work for us, so there wasn't a big this just isn't working for us. There's others who are just like, look, I've got these commitments that I've got to get family and kids to, and so I need more flexibility, and so we're able to accommodate that. Those are kind of easy solutions that if you just take the time to listen to the individuals, and we're small enough that we can be nimble about how we can tailor our policies. It doesn't always work the same way, at least for our size firm, for the legal assistants and our staff and our paralegals, and ideally they would all love to just work from home, and it doesn't quite work yet for us. It's not that it wouldn't necessarily be possible, but right now it's not. And so from our side, we're still trying to just be able to react to the situation and finding that necessarily being proactive doesn't always address the actual problem that your actual employees have.
Emily, what's your firm doing around practical solutions for work-life balance?
Yeah, so I think similar to what Ryan described, I think any big firm that truly cares about this is creating space for the conversations and encouraging conversations to happen at the partner level, at the associate level, and the office level. They're empowering offices and practice groups to make decisions that work best for those practice groups and those people. When it comes to working from home and creating flexibility in the hybrid model, I've been really pleased and proud of how Husch Blackwell has handled it. So right before the pandemic started, Husch started the Link, a virtual office. It runs just like a brick and mortar office. It has a managing partner, an office manager, associates, partners, staff, paralegals, etc. It did so well that they opened it kind of firm-wide a few months into the pandemic, and it's now one of our largest offices. And I think out of that came a trust and a realization that this remote work is possible for more people than we initially thought. And then coming out of the pandemic, to the extent we're out of it, they gave everyone an option. You can join the Link. You can say, I'll come in 1 to 2 days, but I'll hotel in a visiting office, or I commit to coming in 3 to 5 days a week and I keep my assigned office. You got to answer a survey based on your interests, including staff. For certain members of our office, there was a understanding that your manager might have to approve your request, or there will be some experimental time. But that, I think, really made the attorneys and staff feel heard, and then they were empowered to make that choice for themselves, which I think is always a predictor of contentment. But again, I think supporting those conversations and listening, even if action doesn't follow.
Emily, are these things now entrenched, or are we still in the beta phase where we're trying to see if it works, see if productivity has gone down, see if economics of running a firm has changed, or is it pretty much, all right, this is how it's going to be?
I think this is how it's going to be at Husch Blackwell. I mean, I fully expect, I don't know that the firm would agree, but this is me, my personal opinion, not the opinion of Husch Blackwell. I think the Link will eventually become our largest office. And it'll be forever. But there's, again, we keep talking about flexibility. There's flexibility in that. If you're hoteling and that doesn't work for you, you can go fully remote. If you're hoteling and that doesn't work for you, you can, if there's an office available, you can get a permanent office. I think what also comes with that is I am not originally from Milwaukee. I have gone home to Atlanta much more often in the last almost 2 years, because there's this understanding that I can go down there and work and be just as productive. Big law firms were more productive when everyone was working from home than they've maybe ever been.
Now,
they made a lot more money.
And that was also based on just the pandemic era, because there's also this other variable is the idea that nothing else is going on in the world too.
Yeah, and that's what we haven't seen the long-term impacts of yet, is what will happen if courts go back into person, if all these conferences and CLEs are now starting up again. Will that impact productivity?
And now, a word from our sponsors. Want to replay that online seminar you attended the other day but don't have time to be at your desk to watch it? The State Bar of Wisconsin Pinnacle now offers select seminar content in a downloadable MP3 audio format that can be played just about anywhere. So now you can take your State Bar content with you on the go. Check it out today at wisbar.org/seminars. Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
And we also have to talk about it's kind of a gift and a curse, right? When we talk about that productivity, working from home. Emil and I have had this conversation ad nauseum about how we don't love the fully remote. I mean, if you do, that's great, but we don't love this idea of being fully remote, especially as young attorneys, because one, you cannot shut it off. Already have trouble shutting it off because we have our phones attached to us all the time. But I found it very difficult we're still in the pandemic, but during the quarantine phase to stop working, especially when I was at an international company, because someone could see you're online and they're like, hey, Kristen, could you do this thing? And you're like, yeah, sure. I'm awake. I'm happy to do it, but also it never ends. Like, there is no separation of church and state, for lack of better terms. And that's how I felt. Like I could never, before the pandemic, before quarantine, I could work from home, you know, as you asked, right? Like, hey, I need to do this thing. I need to get a package, and no one would bat an eye. But when I had to work at home, I could not separate the two. So we had the option at my company to go back in the office if you would like to. I started in that role remote. I had been at that company before as an intern, so it wasn't as difficult for me to onboard because I knew like practically everybody on my team already. And then as soon as I could get into the office, I went back to the office. And I think that was August. I started in April. I bought a house, so I was kind of doing all this house stuff. As soon as I moved in July, August 1, I think I was back in the office. It's like I prefer being there. And right now we have a hybrid option. So 3 days a week we need to be in the office. They did the official rollout where the attorneys, I think we were in the first group who had to come back into the office, but it's 3 days a week. You have to be in on Monday. It varies team to team, but most of our clients are in on Mondays. Sometimes I go in 4 days a week. Sometimes I go in 5 days a week. I have the privilege of living 5 minutes from my job, so it's easy for me to go in, and we have a gym, and we have nice amenities, so, you know, free lunch and such. So I don't mind going in. I like seeing my coworkers. I like that.
And you don't pay attention when you walk on the street, because I was always
Emil sees me like every morning, because I'm usually checking an email. He sees me walking.
I'm like, pay attention.
Almost every morning, he's going to work and I'm walking into the office. But yeah, so talking about that productivity, and we talked about it kind of offline, but how that has changed. We talk about all these great things with work-life balance, but how the work from home situation has changed those expectations for better or worse. I'm curious to hear both of your thoughts on that.
So I think that is a huge problem. I love going into the office partially because I can then separate it. The commute is that time to ramp up for the day and decompress for the day. But in that's really where I started to need some pretty radical boundaries and systems and routines when I was forced to work from home. So when I came to Hush Blackwell, for example, in November of 2020, I was not allowed to come to the office, didn't have a key card. Removing that choice really impacted me. You know, I'm an introvert. My husband was like, you love being alone. And I was like, when I choose it, when it's my decision. And there are things you can do, right? So this is very radical. I know a lot of people will feel like this is an impossibility. I don't have work email on my phone. And it has freed up part of my brain, truly, to not have that on my phone. I'm always with my iPad or laptop. So if I feel like I need to be checking it more often, that's almost always available. There are things you can do that likely will feel radical to you, but will help you set up those boundaries. So like an opening routine and a closing routine, so that for some people that involves, if you're fortunate enough, privileged enough to have a home office, you shut the door when you leave for the day to kind of signal to yourself.
Yeah, and so there are the things that firms are doing and the things that I think lawyers themselves can do, and I know you're a very big advocate of this, Emily, on LinkedIn. I do remember coming across some research, which I think was the largest research post-pandemic about work from home. I think it was done amongst Microsoft employees, which showed that collaboration actually went down. That it actually had, and actually employees, at least at that time. And again, it's kind of interesting to see what happens because the variables were different, right? The world was shut down. I remember, I think I billed more.
For sure.
I worked harder because there was no demarcation. And for someone like yourself, Ryan, and myself, it's a little different, right? I mean, I have 3 kids, you have 6. We don't want to do work at home. There is no work to be done at home with, toddlers and all that stuff, right? And so with that collaboration, that collaboration aspect, you talk about productivity and collaboration, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens, right? But what I'm hearing and what I think we all love is for the first time in the legal industry, we're willing to explore these options.
Experiment.
And
sure.
in 4 to 5 years, it might be like, okay, didn't work. But for the first time ever, the law has changed, or at least grown in leaps and bounds in an area where we usually just slow roll everything, right? And I'm hearing like we have to be open to these possibilities. Now, there is an idea too that firms that do not offer this, and there is this perception, firms that don't offer this, especially within a younger generation, you're just not progressive enough. you're not offering this. And what are your thoughts about this monolith, or trying to at least fit every firm within that box, or every law department within that box of, hey, you must offer work from home options, or you're not helping your employees, their mental health and their well-being?
Let's kicking it to Ryan because we kind of cut you off. Sorry. Get your
no,
other
it's
answer.
fine. I think the answer is Emil's question is, we're talking about a legal industry here in Wisconsin that you can't just put in a single box. Like there's such a spectrum, and there are many practices that are dependent on the doors being open and the people being there so that clients can walk in the doors. Yeah. And that may not be the case. For my firm, we don't have clients coming in. Our clients are in different cities, and they're certainly not in Hartford, Wisconsin. They could be, but there's a different firm that takes care of that company. But unfortunately, anyhow, I digress. But so that model won't work for every law firm. It will only work for some. You just have to express that to the people who are applying and say, look, this is the kind of firm we are. These are our clientele. And this is what they need from us. And so if that's not what they're looking for, right now there are so many options. Mm-hmm. They control their own destinies right now. They're not struggling to find vacancies or openings. So if that's your law firm, you don't need to be apologetic. You don't have to try to figure out how can I make my firm fit in this remote box. Mm-hmm. If it works for you, great. But if it doesn't, you don't have to apologize.
I completely agree. Transparency is key, kind of on all fronts. But I think what some young attorneys, new attorneys feel is they're told A in the interview, they get there, and it's Z. And so firms, to the extent a firm can, a law practice in-house can know who they are in that moment when they're interviewing and being clear about what their expectations are, the type of firm they are in terms of remote work, or there is no flexibility and you're expected to be in the office all the time, advertising that and not apologizing for it, because you also don't want to hire people who aren't going to be a good fit. You mm-hmm. lose money down the line if that happens, you lose time. And so having just clear expectations, a clear identity on what it is you're going to offer, and telling people that.
And I would even add to that, because we talked about what young lawyers can actually do. We need to have a clear identity of what we want and where our boundaries are and what we plan, what we need from companies or firms. I mentioned in the last episode, health, physical health, and wellness is very important to me. So when I'm looking at companies, where's the gym? And do you offer classes? And what do you offer around, what are your thoughts, supervisor? What are your thoughts, CEO, about us working at this time? And usually at every company I've worked at, it's kind of built in where they're pushing you to, please go work out. Don't do an hour workout, do a 30-minute workout, but please go work out.
Drive our insurance costs down. That's the real reason.
Oh, please. So, that's an important thing. But we have to know ourselves and what we want and what we're willing to stand for. To Ryan's point, if you don't, every firm doesn't have to fit into this box. Attorneys have the autonomy to say, okay, well, maybe that firm's not for me because they're not offering remote options. All right. Or maybe this company isn't for me because they're not offering, my company offers volunteer hours, like not PTO. You don't have to use your PTO to do volunteer work. I think we get like 15 hours or something. I'm not sure. But that's awesome because you're encouraging me to go on the UNCF walk, or you're encouraging me to, do pro bono work because you're offering that to me. So we need to know ourselves. And the firms need to know themselves, and we all need to be transparent and not say, I'll work for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then we're like, just kidding, I'm not doing that. I'm going to quietly quit and not be doing work, even though I told you I would in the interview.
And now, a word from our sponsors. Are you struggling with work-life balance issues? Could you use some help addressing these challenges? WISLAP offers confidential well-being support to lawyers, judges, and law students. With trained peer volunteers, structured well-being resources, and individualized support services, WISLAP aims to foster work-life balance within the Wisconsin legal community. Find us on the web at wispar.org/WISLAP. Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
So I think that's key, Kristen, and you talked about this, I think, maybe in the first part of the episode, is being cautious about the expectations you're also setting. Mm-hmm. Because if you come in and you're a workaholic and you're billing 2,200 hours the first year, and then you maybe have a crisis, an identity crisis, something comes up in your life, or you just decide that was too much, have you set their expectations where they're then going to be shocked that you're pulling back a little, which causes a whole host of well-being problems.
Do you also think newer lawyers need to have some more empathy for employers, because folks are trying to figure this out, right? One of the major decisions, we decided to go back in my small shop very early on because one of our practice areas is a B2C, employment law, plaintiff side employment law work, because there is this assumption, right? I mean, some of my clients don't have Zoom, right? And the way I need client control, or the way I need to build a rapport with some of my clients, I can't do that over the telephone. There are some even when mediations are still happening right over Zoom, there's some clients I require, because we all know there's some, those times when mediation starts and the client says, I am not taking a penny. And we know it's easier when you're standing next to them and you can build that rapport, right? So we made that decision that, okay, hey, our employment law practice grew within, it kind of grew rapidly within a year, such that we, our B2C side of things started to surpass the B2B aspects. And so we had to make that change because we are still figuring it out. So with empathy comes when a firm decides to make that, or they then said, hey, you're not being transparent. You told me this is what I expected, because the law is always in flux. How we practice law is always in flux. Should young lawyers also give at least a little bit in terms of their expectations from employers?
Again, I think it goes back to transparency and what you tell them from the beginning. But, I do have some concerns. Obviously, your practice you're describing, there are reasons that you need to be in person, and there are those that you can't get around. But I guess the broader question that I have is we're happy that the technology works. We're like, this is awesome. I can practice, and I feel like I'm not losing anything. But I don't know that we've asked the question of where this will land us in 4 or 5 years. You guys did a podcast on mentorship. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you remotely mentor your groups as well as you could have done in person. I'm sure that there's a way to do it. But
it doesn't work.
I wonder.
I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what, and this is where we disagree on this. And Emily and I, we've had conversations and debates on this, and which is fine and perspectives. Yeah, I do not think it works. I just don't. I don't think it's effective. I think it's forced. I think it's contrived, and I think.
Isn't all mentorship contrived and forced?
You must not have long-distance friends. You're maintaining relationships
I never was able to do long-distance relationships. They always broke. I was broke up in my.
Oh my
gosh.
Even
friends around the country.
Exactly, it's true. Sorry, Ryan.
Sorry, Ryan.
No, but on the other side, I see that there are advantages to this because a lot of the hearings now are all by Zoom. And gosh, I hope that doesn't change because there's nothing worse than wasting a whole day driving to a scheduling conference or sitting in Chicago in a court waiting for your case to be called among 100 other lawyers.
And you can't bill for that time anymore always.
A complete waste. But it also gives the opportunity for us to more easily give assignments to associates that they can, we don't have to say, well, no, the client's not going to pay for your flight out to such and such city to argue a motion. But now that the motion is by Zoom, and frankly, a lot of the district court judges and circuit court judges are encouraging younger associates to be a part of the process, it's easier to get them involved and not have to worry that the client's not going to pay for it or that you're going to be making a big mistake. So I think in that way, technology helps get more opportunities in the virtual courtroom.
Yeah, so let's touch on this, with flexibility thing, and especially with newer lawyers, right, who come into the profession. And I am a big proponent, and Kristen and I, we've talked about this. We love what technology does. We think it's great. I fear that the push to have young lawyers day one work from home, from the outsider perspective, looking at larger law firms, it's not benevolent. It's really, yes, one of our biggest overhead costs is real estate. So you want to sit at home? Fine. I absolutely think the long-term impacts of that for people of color and for women would be they'll be left out of the conversation because, and I tell every younger lawyer, I say, hey, absolutely take advantage of these things, but we are in a business of people, It's about human relationships. There's nothing you're going to tell me except you're going to redefine how human relationships work. That you can build as deep of a bond with a person or a colleague solely through the lens of a 4K camera. And I've seen this, and so some of the people who have taken wholeheartedly advantage of this stuff, and rightfully so, and based on the times, all right, you have women and mothers especially. My wife is not in the law, but the VP of HR of a nine-figure company, hundreds of millions of dollars, whatever, across all the country, and she has 3 kids. We have a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 10-month-old, and it's stressful. And my fear is that, and we have to be intentional, is that women and younger attorneys who take advantage of this really early on and don't come back into the workspace, physical workspace, might become forgotten because if I'm a single guy, right, I'm going to be, I don't have those, I may not have, and these are generalizations, right? And then we miss the mentorship opportunities. They're not getting the mentorship that they need. And then when it comes to time partnerships or advancements, they're not given that. And then, it's like, yeah, you've been working from home, but what has that done?
So can I tease that out? Because yes, Emil and I have talked about this, where we are people who like working in the office, from time to time, or we like that hybrid. We want that. Yeah, so we have a bias there. But I will say it doesn't mean it doesn't work for other people. So there are other people who, this model of working at home, that works for them. If we're talking about mothers, we know, and I've read studies kind of on both ends, but it was a bit easier for some women to be able to work at home and deal with childcare or be there at a certain time or whatever it may be. And that's not just a man-woman thing, but that's kind of what the studies were talking about. You also make the point, Emil, if you were a single man or just as a man, you may be able to interface. And, me as a woman, I can do that. Same thing. I have that option because I don't have children, right? So, and not to say that mothers don't, because we know that they do, and they do just fine in the firm. But I do agree with you that this can become a thing where, and I don't know, we just have to let time tell us what happens, but the mentorship aspect or the visibility aspect of this with young lawyers not being in the office, it 100% is going to trickle down to women and people of color who already in some respects feel left out in the law, and part of it is because we make up such a tiny percentage of the law in this industry. But yes, 100%. I fear that not being in the office means you are not seen and you don't get these opportunities.
I just on that point real quick. I wish I could phone a friend and call my wife in, because she made a very good point about this. She says, "Hey, I'm a working mother. I don't want to work from home so I can take care of my child and work."
Yes, that's not That's one person.
I know, but that highlighted a point, right? She's like, no, instead, I want to be able to afford, or at least have a job that I can afford childcare, so I can work, right? So with that, it misses. It becomes an easy solution. Like, hey, right. You can work from home, right?
And then it can become worse.
And then you're not giving me the compensation I need. No, I don't want to take care of my child and work. I want to have the abilities, because if you think about this, right, especially in the child context, a lot of times it's a thing, especially, not everyone works at a large firm. There are compensation disparities across, right? It becomes an easy way of saying, hey, you know what, that way you can be at home, you can take care of a child, you can work and all that. And my fear is that it doesn't deal with the deeper issue, because that person needs the support, or they need the financial, they need to be paid appropriately to be able to provide a conducive environment for them to work.
And now, a word from our sponsors. In these uncertain economic times, the State Bar of Wisconsin wants to make sure that you and your practice have the best available tools. Ultimate Pass and Books Unbound are available for purchase using 6-month installment plans. Contact our customer service team at 1-800-728-7788 for more information. Thank you, and now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
So I think that leads to part of what I would say on this front. I think part of the reckoning that is happening in the legal profession, and particularly in big firms, is the one-size-fits-all never worked. We're now talking about it not working. And there needs to be more options because it takes all kinds. The legal profession requires all kinds of firms, all kinds of practices, and to be the best legal profession we can be, we need all kinds of attorneys and all kinds of humans in those jobs. So in addition to the flexibility and the choice we've talked about, what I think all of these things, if you're going to have a hybrid option where people are coming and going or working fully remotely as they please, you need over-communication, you need intentionality, and you need self-discipline. So firms have to over-communicate about their expectations, and attorneys have to over-communicate about their needs. Firms and individual attorneys have to be extremely intentional about building relationships with one another, with practice groups, within the office, and making it an expectation that because we're remote, because we have hybrid people, when we have a firm event, when we have a practice group lunch, we expect you to be there for that. It could be virtually, but we expect you to participate because that's how we're going to retain our culture. That's how we're going to build those relationships. Again, I came on board to Hush completely virtual. My biggest mentor and sponsor at the firm just started coming back to the office this week. Our entire relationship has been 99.9% virtual, and there are days I wouldn't make it through the day without them and the communication, but we built that understanding that he's accessible by Teams. He's the first partner I've ever sent a text to, and we talk on the phone. Like it just is a level of intentionality, and I do joke a lot about this. I've been maintaining virtual relationships with my friends outside of school since 6th grade. This is not new for me and my generation. And again, it's not one size fits all. There needs to be a place for the Emils of the world and the Emilys of the world and everything in between.
So let me take a step back. So Ryan and I, we see each other. Ryan's one of my mentors. Right. We see each other maybe once every 6 months or so. I just don't think I think the most effective foundations, the problem with newer lawyers is that you're trying to build the foundations of a relationship through, because as a more experienced lawyer, right, we have relationships with people. We're not just meeting them. I can call you up. Emily, you can be my mentor, and I may not have to see you, but I know Emily. I was a little concerned with folks who graduated. They knew nothing about the law. They never went to any events, for that 2-year time frame. And for me, I don't know about you, there's no magical wand that got waved over me that made me feel like a lawyer. As a litigator, the first time I felt like a lawyer was when I went into court, right? When I went to these bar events, when I went to state bar events and I got to interact with other lawyers. I just don't, I understand and I think it's important, but I just don't want this to become a way for mentors and more experienced lawyers to shirk from their true responsibilities from actually taking time off to meet with you, taking an interest, and building that mentorship. And I don't want younger lawyers to feel like, okay, well, I'm being given an opportunity to work from home, so it's great. I don't need to connect with anyone. So that's my fear.
There are $1 million attorneys out there who never speak to anybody else. And so I think, again, that goes back to it's individualized. But what I hear you saying, Emil, my reaction to that is the people who want to mentor are going to find a way to mentor. The people who want to be mentored are going to find a way to be mentored. And there's always going to be kind of that, for lack of a better phrase, that cream rising to the top, right? And I don't mean that like it's the best, but those people are going to do those things no matter the environment. So, I mean, I do think that's happening. I've participated in a fully virtual legal mentoring network this year. I had law students reach out to me. We met once virtually. 90% of them never followed up with me again. With one of them, I have built a very strong relationship, and I've seen him in person one time.
But that's like telling me that, well, hey, you know what, diversity really within law is not an issue. Emil, I mean, hey, you're Emil, you're black, you're this, you're that. You rose to the top, right? So why can't everyone else do it? So I do understand that there is. I do understand that there is an individual aspect, and that can do, but I do believe it is incumbent on the system to create certain things, because as a black man in this industry, I've heard those arguments made about diversity. Like, why do I have? No, we don't have to do these diversity events. We don't have to have, a diversity goal. We don't have to intentionally want to grow our diversity ranks, because those who want it, the cream of the crop, will rise to the top. And my whole thing is that, but that assumes that people have that access in the first place.
That's what it goes back to, the intentionality. If firms are really serious about it, they're going to create those opportunities for people. Life is a two-way street. The firms can create those opportunities, but people have to take advantage of them too. And there's always going to be people that don't. But it's a two-way street of intentionality. If you want to be mentored, you have to go out and find those relationships. If firms want to build the diversity, they have to be intentional about creating the systems that are going to allow the people who want to participate in them. It is 100% about intentionality.
But I think what we're saying here, Emil, is it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like, I don't think it needs to be in person. That's the only way you can build mentorship, or it has to be virtual. What works for you? This all goes back to individuals. And I know we've talked about this, so I don't disagree with you that in-person time is really important, but it's really important for me and it's really important for you. And we do think that it'll have a trickle-down effect for diversity for people who are not in the office, they don't have that face time. But at the end of the day, if it's a lot better for you to work from home for a multitude of reasons, I don't want to say that you can't build a great practice, you can't build a great career, you can't have mentors and sponsors that care about you just because you don't want to be in the office. There's so many jobs right now where they are fully at corporations, fully 100% remote, and people said, it works great for me, we like it, we build bonds, and it's cool. So
Ryan, I want to get your thoughts in on this.
Yeah,
Sure. I mean, I think that what Emily described is certainly the ideal, and to create this virtual world that they have, but they haven't just done it like, oh, well, we have the technology, it's available if you want to use it. No, they've built rules and discipline and structure around it, whereas not every firm knows how to do that or can do it, and they say, well, we've got the technology. Look, you can go home and work from home. But I will tell you that when associates do that, in my experience, I don't hear anything from them. There's, I don't have the ability to quite design a virtual firm like Emily is talking about. And so those associates in those firms who are able to, hey, like we've got the technology, we can connect you to our network and you can work, but there's no intentionality, there's no design, there's no way to continue to mentor them. And in fact, I don't know if he's on vacation or if he's just working from home. I haven't heard from him in weeks.
Yeah, those lines of communications are key. And again, it's a two-way street. I think partners have to lead by example, and associates have to speak up more than maybe they're comfortable doing.
And we're very bad at doing that. That kind of communication, associates to employers and employers to associates, we are terrible.
Oh, yeah, we don't want to bother people.
My perspective on this is a little broader, and I think Kristen and I probably bring some of the broadest experiences, just because as someone who runs a law firm, I talk to a certain class of folks who I may not normally, based on my time out of law school, maybe talking to, right? But I'm also a younger lawyer, so I also get to talk to younger lawyers. I run a small firm. I have friends who are partners of mid-sized firms. I have friends who are partners of large firms, right? And so think about diversity, and this is why. And I'm not saying it in this. I'm trying to take it out of the, just the Hush Black Hole context. But I think they are doing a good job based on what you said. I just don't believe that a profession that couldn't get diversity right when people were interacting face to face is somehow going to be able to get it right through the lenses of a 4K camera. I'm just saying that there are certain aspects of this conversation, certain things, because what I foresee is it becomes a cop-out for certain things that needs to be done. 100%, it is incumbent on every individual to go out there and make it happen, right? But I've also become very conscious of the fallacy of single stories. I've been at tables, and Kristen, you have been at tables where when we talk about diversity, and they're like, well, you did it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, yes, I did it, but that doesn't absolve us from a responsibility from the general problem. And then I'm just using diversity as an example, right? And so what I don't want to see happen is where the legal industry for some of these harder issues with like equity for women, right? Start using some of these tools of work-life balance or work flexibility as an escape, right? Like, hey, we set up this virtual mentorship program, you know, and no one used it, right? So, hey, we did what we're supposed to do, you know, female attorneys who are in the childbearing phases of their lives and giving birth and all that stuff, like, hey, we allowed you to work from home and all that stuff. You're making stuff. Oh, you didn't make partner and all that stuff. Like, they would have to be that, like, okay, now there's a quarter. I mean, maybe a quarter. They say, hey, how many women are we putting in partnership tracks?
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Wow, that speaker yesterday was really great, but I wish I had taken better notes during the seminar.
Don't worry, we got you. Select on-demand seminars now available in an MP3 audio format at wisbar.org/seminars. Can't find the time to attend a seminar, but want the course materials as a reference? State Bar Wisconsin Pinnacle now offers PDF downloads of most seminar materials. Check it out today at wisbar.org/seminars. Thank you, and now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
Yeah, so I would say to combat some of that, what you're seeing, and again, I have only ever known big law, is billable equivalent credit for our mentees get it if they're participating in the formal mentorship program. The mentors get it if they're participating in the formal mentorship program. And there's a billable number that I put that to, and at the end of the year, I can get up to 50 hours of credit for participating in the mentorship program that goes to my billable requirement. The members of our diversity, equity, and inclusion group, they get billable time for participating in that program. We have diversity liaisons, so the liaison and the liaisonee, they all get billable equivalent credit. That is how firms kind of combat that and encourage, you get real credit. So when you are up for partner and it shows that you've made your hours every year, some of that has been because you're doing pro bono, because you're participating in diversity. We have a diversity question on our reviews where partners and associates talk about what they're doing to move those issues forward every year. And that is, they'll look back on that when you're up for partner. And so it becomes a holistic, again, extremely intentional thing. I think it does require a lot of trial and error. It requires a lot of forward thinking. And to bring it back to the work-life balance thing, I think it is about experimenting to find out what works and what doesn't. And all of these things, like we've talked about, 4 or 5 years from now, we might say, it didn't work.
I think it also, and that point is well taken, Emil. I get what you're trying to say, but with the issue of diversity or the issue of work-life balance, if you want to, you will. I stand on that. In 2022, if you want to, you will. So if you want to diversify your firm, you will. If you want to encourage work-life balance, you will. You will figure out the way to do that. You will hire the right people. You will do whatever you need to do. So to your point, you said, this is a profession that has not been able to contend with diversity or been able to diversify it more than it has been. So working from home can stop that progress or lack thereof. I don't think it really matters because if you want to, you will. If you wanted to, you already have been doing that. So yes, I hear you, but also it's 2022. Come on, we don't have excuses for
I guess I'm
this.
just always very skeptical when, corporations quickly adopt anything, with like wholesale, like, yeah, absolutely, it's great. It's like, okay, cool. But so we talked about some of the things that firms are doing to help out, and you kind of gave us some things. It seems like Hush Blackwell, they are trailblazers in that, right? At least in a large law firm. Ryan, you talked about what your firm's doing. Kristen, what y'all doing in-house?
Well, I told you we have the hybrid model right now. And I should also mention that my company I think it's the largest in-house law firm in Milwaukee. So we have around 80 or 90 attorneys. So we have the hybrid option. We have which we had this pre-quarantine, the option to do volunteer work, the volunteer hours instead of taking your PTO. We have the gym. We have great food options. Mental health options also are kind of built in our insurance package. So there are a lot of things. And then also we just have great people that work at that company. I've always thought that, and I still think that, to where you have people who understand the flexibility. They have lives outside of work, and they're like, hey, I understand that maybe today you need to work from home. Cool, that's all good. Or, hey, I understand you need to leave at 3, Okay, I never leave at 3, but other people may need to leave at 3 because you have children to pick up or something to do. So I had that flexibility. I've always had that flexibility with every company I've worked at, where they said, okay, it's all good. As long as the work is done, we don't care what how you're getting it done, or the times, I should say, that you're getting it done. So I think my company is trailblazer is not the right word, but they do what they need to do to keep. It's not just the lawyers, right? They're not just trying to keep lawyers happy. They're trying to keep everyone happy at that company.
Okay, you guys, I get it. You guys love your companies. What can we do to improve? That's a tricky one. It can't be all perfect.
Can this be a dream world improvement?
Yes.
Yeah, let's do that.
The billable hours should not be a token of productivity and success of an associate. Just because you're billing a ton of hours does not mean you're turning out a bunch of good work that's collected upon. Just because you're not billing a ton of hours doesn't mean you're not turning out a bunch of really good work that is collected upon. The billable hour as a badge of productivity is detrimental to mental health and well-being in big law, and I think it'll go away in my lifetime. I know it won't go away anytime soon, but if I could wave a wand, that's what I would do.
That's a big statement, Emily.
So what you guys have done better?
Oh, I don't know.
It's perfect. It's fine.
No, it's not that. I think that I don't just mean my company, but in-house generally, we can all do a better job of keeping our clients abreast of like what we do and the time it takes to do what we do. Because we are one company, right? Like your success is my success. I know that sometimes clients don't understand our time and how much time we can expend. So yeah, we could do a better job telling our clients what we do and helping them understand our workload.
Ryan?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we're always trying to improve on and that needs to be better is the listening, the transparency, the understanding what our expectations are as owners and what our staff, our associates' needs and expectations are. It sounds easy. It sounds like it's just let's go have a cup of coffee and we'll talk about it. But it doesn't work like that in practice, because whether both sides are very guarded with their true expectations because they don't know how you're going to react to it. And I think that is just an ongoing process of trying to build trust, try to understand how we can design your position and how you can better work for us. And that's a process. And there's no technology that's going to get over that.
And now, a word from our sponsors. Would you like to implement new efficiencies into your law practice but don't know where to begin? Practice 411, the State Bar of Wisconsin's Law Office Management Assistance Program, is the place to start. Don't wait. Contact Practice 411 today for a complimentary and confidential consultation at 1-800-957-4670. Don't mind the dust. We've been remodeling the paralegal certification program here at the State Bar of Wisconsin. New requirements, new CLE options, and new ways to learn, all in a new format. For more information, contact our customer service team at 1-800-728-7788 and ask what the State Bar can do for you. Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
Yeah, and by the way, just so you know, I pushed a lot of you on some of these questions, not because they necessarily reveal how I truly feel about some of that, because I wanted to see how you think about these things.
Wait. Before you try to move on, what can you do?
What can I do?
To help your employees?
I think, I designed a law firm and I decided to start a law firm because I wanted to get rid of some of the things I didn't like about the law. So from day one, we've never had billable hour requirements. We've always adequately paid our staff. I am always very aware of what other mid-markets are, mid-firms or smaller firms. Our associates are compensated at what mid-sized law firms start their associates at. And the moment the State Bar makes it possible for non-lawyers to become partners, I will do that. So I've been very progressive on that front. I've been ahead of the game. And so I just wanted to hear you guys hear some things, talk about some things. I don't know when anyone comes in and I don't know when they leave, and I don't care. And if I have to care, then you're the wrong person for the job. And we've always, and I've tried to take what I hated about the law and not try to replicate that. One of the things my partner and I talked about the other day was, leave policies. I'm a small shop. I'm happy to say that we paid 12 weeks of paid full salary. We're not even required to. I lost my father when I was 13 years old. I remember doing a review of our handbook, and the bereavement policy was like, you got 3 days. And so I thought about it. I'm like, so you're telling me my wife died right now?
I gotta come back.
You gotta. I'm like, I would. And so we changed it, and and now we've changed that to, I think you get about 2 weeks of paid bereavement leave for immediate families. I think it's about 1 week for if it's extended families or a pet or something.
I love the pet. My pets are my life.
Yeah, and so we've been doing that, and I'll tell you this, right? Especially with the billable hour requirements, at times is it a little hard because that was one of the hardest things, especially once the firm started to grow and we started bringing people on. Like, it's just the culture. That's how you gauge productivity. That's how you gauge bonuses and all that stuff, and it just means you have to just define what success is and what that looks like in the bottom line, because the thing about the
corporations do it,
right? They do it because if you think about the billable hour requirement, it actually rewards inefficiencies, and so even down to how we bill some of our clients, we change it. It's like, okay, if we are providing value with some of our, so on the transactional side of things, we've worked on this a lot. If we're providing value, just because we do it in less time doesn't mean we should get paid less. So we're taking a more value billing approach. We've taken defense cases where we've done a reverse contingency, where it's like, hey, you know what, this is what you're faced with. If we do this, if we save you this, you're going to give us that. Just to try, and guess what? We're always trying to tweak that. There is no perfect way. And I think smaller law firms, actually it's amazing to hear larger firms like Harsh Blackwell doing what they're trying to do, because it's a little harder, right? You're dealing with 800 lawyers. I think smaller firms need to be the hub of these innovative solutions. And so that's what we've been doing. And we're always looking to learn. We're always looking to try things out. At the firm, we just have a culture of collaboration in terms of people being in the office at some point in time. So for the lawyers, they're not expected or demanded to be in there at any specific time. But, we expect people to be around at least a couple of times a week because we like each other.
Yeah.
And but the expectation is like, hey, it's not work from home 100%. We like each other. We trust that you're going to use your discretion.
So what I'm hearing is the way that you're going to, because I just heard that your firm was perfect. But what you're actually going to do is think about remote options. All right, great. We can wrap it up. You guys heard it here. He's going to have remote attorneys if you want to come work there.
Be in California and work for Emil.
You know what? And that's something they'll be willing to consider on a person-to-person basis, as a matter of fact.
I think I did the math on your policy. So if your dog dies and you adopt the child and you use your full vacation, you can basically take the next 6 months paid off.
See how attorneys think?
And you know what? There is nothing wrong with that. We need to get away from this metric-driven idea that the metric of success is always cents and dollars. I live in a house.
We won't improve well-being and work-life balance unless we change that a little.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I think I'm an example that those things are not mutually exclusive. I live in a house I want to live in. I drive the car I want to drive. There's nothing that I want, that I need, that I can't have. And guess what? I don't mind if an employee did that. Just so happened to have all those series of messed up things happening, like their parent dying. God forbid, oh wow, their parent dying, their grandparent dying next, then having a kid. Yes, stack it up. 7 months, 8 months, I'll pay you.
This is on record.
It is.
Ladies and gentlemen, you hear
absolutely. But we need to stop, because people are more than just cents and dollars.
I agree.
Attorneys are more than that.
I agree.
And until we start changing that, we change absolutely nothing.
That's a good place to end.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. Thanks for indulging. This is a crazy topic.
No, this is awesome. Thank you both for all your insight. This is great.
And and so hey, thanks for listening. Feel free to listen to us next month if you have any topics, ideas, or
hey, when we post this on LinkedIn, I really want to hear other people's thoughts around work-life balance. I want to hear what people have to say. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Until next time, I'm your host, and Outbro. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, let us know. I'm your host, Emil Ovbiagele, and we'll catch you next time.
Are you struggling with work-life balance issues? Could you use some help addressing these challenges? WISLAP offers confidential well-being support to lawyers, judges, and law students. With trained peer volunteers, structured well-being resources, and individualized support services, WISLAP aims to foster work-life balance within the Wisconsin legal community. Find us on the web at wisbar.org/WISLAP.